Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Brian Anders. I am a business consultant supervisor with the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection for the City of Chicago. And what I am going to be discussing today is Business Licensing 101. So, we're going to go through the basics of business licensing as it pertains to being licensed within the city limits of Chicago. We're going to start with an overview of the Small Business Center that is located at City Hall. We are going to go into a business licensing 101 element of what you should expect, so forth, and then we'll go into some Q&A at the end. The Small Business Center is the one-stop shop for the city. So just so you're aware, BACP Small Business Center is responsible for issuing over 30,000 licenses every year. We're located on the 8th floor of City Hall, room 800. We're open for walk-ins from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. We do not take appointments, so it is only on a walk-in basis. We also offer you to be able to check the times of waiting online currently, and that is also available on the business and licensing website. The Small Business Center also processes licenses online through Chicago Business Direct, as mentioned earlier, and I will also cover how you can do licensing through there as well. So, the majority of businesses that operate in the city of Chicago require a business license of some kind. There are some exemptions that come into the play on that. So, for example, attorneys, doctors, architects. And just this morning, we had a sports agent who was checking to see if they would have to have a business license to operate in the city of Chicago, and they do not because they are representing a client similar to a lawyer. If you're unsure of whether or not you qualify for a business license exemption, you can see that on the city of Chicago, the chicago.gov website under the BACP page. If you're looking for anything as it's tied to general contractors, trade licenses, and the like, those are handled by the Department of Buildings. You can contact them directly for instructions of how you can acquire, renew, so forth, your license for that. So, what are the types of business licenses that the city offers? So, your limited business license is the most common business license. So, if you're a boutique, you're a flower store, you're any general retail store, those are going to need a limited business license. If you're an administrative office for various reasons, you're a property manager, managing multiple properties from a single location, that location needs to be licensed. So these are just some examples of the limited business license. Regulated business license get into require a little more attention from the city, which is why they become a regulated license. Therefore, when you're talking about home occupation, we're not talking about you work from home for an employer. We're talking about you are operating a business out of your home. Home repair needs a regulated business license. So different from the Department of Buildings, general contractor, trade licensing. If you're somebody who just does general home repair, you do home painting, something like that, you don't need to get a general contractor's license. You'd be fine with just getting a regulated business license from the Department of BACP. If you're doing expediting, if you're a hotel, these are all examples of regulated business licenses that have to be acquired in order to operate within the ordinances of the city of Chicago. And then we get into the specialized licensing. Retail food, liquor, tobacco, animal care, children's services, etc. Why do these businesses require a specialized license? Well, a lot of the reasons these licenses are specialized is because they require inspections before the license is actually issued. So they're a process in order to get them. So if you think you're going to be coming in for a license of this kind, be prepared that you're not going to walk out same day with a license like that. It's going to take a period of time in order to get that license. So what are the application stages for acquiring a business license? Well, the first thing we ask everyone who's coming in through the door or logging in online, before they even start the process, decide how you want to apply. Do you want to be a sole proprietor where you're taking on the responsibility yourself as the business owner? Or do you want to form a legal entity such as a corporation, an LLC, or a limited partnership, therefore having some legal um, safeties involved in establishing your business? You want to define the business activity, understand what you are going to be selling as a service or as an actual product. And then what are the steps in getting that business off the ground? If you are looking at a brick and mortar location within the city limits, you're going to have a zoning review. That zoning review is going to determine whether or not that business falls within the zoning map of Chicago. So we highly encourage everybody to check that before they even start their application process, is make sure that the address that they're looking at does actually meet the zoning standards for the city of Chicago. Therefore, you do not want to make any upfront payments. You do not want to put down a down payment in order to get this type of license. In order to get the license you're looking for, if you know it's going to require a zoning review, make sure in advance that you do meet the requirements, especially if you're going for a specialized license. Because you're going to invest a lot of money into getting that business off the ground, and then you can find out if you didn't do the zoning review in advance that that location that you chose is not going to be zoned properly for you to open up that business here. Once the zoning review is complete, then you go to your payment. Once you pay for the license, if there's inspections that have to be done afterwards, those inspections are going to take place. Depending on the type of license you're going to get, those inspections can take 30 to 60 days, especially if we need to do a background check. We need time to be able to get the results. We need to be able to comb through the results and make sure that there's no red flags in order to move forward with the application to license issuance. If you meet all the standards for license issuance, then your license will be issued. And there's two ways that you can obtain it. You can either pick it up here at City Hall. We can work out a pickup arrangement with you, or you can have it sent via US mail to your business location. Okay. And most licenses renew on a biannual basis. Now, there are a couple that do not. One in particular that comes to mind is a tobacco license. Those do need to be renewed annually. That will all be explained to you during the licensing process so that you'll know when your licenses need to be renewed. So, as we started out with, decide whether you're applying as a sole proprietor or a legal entity. Okay. If you have you're going as a sole proprietor, you're going to need to register your business assumed name / DBA name with Cook County. So you want to go through that process. You do that at the Cook County Records Office to make sure that the name that you have chosen is okay to use. Because if it's not okay to use because somebody else is using it, you're opening yourself up to legal action. When you're choosing your location, it's not just about where it is. You got to think about what the square footage is going to be, because square footage can impact the cost of the license depending on the type you get. For example, a retail food license is not licensed just on a flat fee. A retail food license, which would include restaurants, grocery stores, convenience stores, etc., those are based on the square footage of the facility. And then you want to, like I said previously, you want to think of a detailed description of all the businesses that are going to be conducted on and off premises. So make sure that you're very detailed in that respect. And when you come into the office and meet with a business consultant, our business consultants are trained to ask the kind of questions to make sure you haven't missed anything and that we are capturing all the proper activities that are being conducted at that location. And from all applicants, we are going to need a valid government issued photo ID. If applicable, and you are registering and applying as a legal entity, we are also going to need your federal employer identification number. You obtain that through the IRS. You're going to need your Illinois Secretary of State file number. That's when you actually form the LLC or the corporation and set it up in the state of Illinois. If you have registered your LLC or corporation in the state outside of Illinois, if you want to conduct business in the city of Chicago, you're going to need to register your LLC or corporation as a foreign entity with the Illinois Secretary of State. And if you're conducting any retail sales or wholesale sales, you're going to need to obtain an Illinois Department of Revenue account ID number. And that can be obtained through going to the Illinois Department of Revenue website, which is tax.illinois.gov. As I mentioned earlier, all brick and mortar locations within the city of Chicago are going to undergo a zoning review. So, as I stated earlier, do not sign a lease, do not make a financial commitment to the location you have chosen until you have determined whether or not it meets the zoning regulations for the city. So the city is divided up into individual zoning districts, which permit which type of businesses are allowed to be in those areas. So once you apply, your application is vetted. Your application considers what are the activities that are allowed at that address. Is there anything that needs to be obtained from the Department of Buildings in the area of permits for work that's going to be done on site? For example, if that location was just a boutique beforehand and you're turning it into a takeout, carry out restaurant, there's going to need to be building permits shown to zoning that show that you have obtained those to do the proper build outs that are going to be needed to place a kitchen, to place maybe a restroom that's available to the public. So we need to get those in place ahead of time. Also, if your location requires a special use permit or it has any parking requirements, that documentation is going to need to be turned over to the zoning team before they are going to approve your application to move forward. If you have any further questions on zoning, you can always reach out to the zoning, or you can look it up on the website with the zoning guide, which can be found at chicago.gov/business licensing. After the application has been approved, the applicant then can make payment on the application, which is going to trigger any inspections that are going to be due for that license. So, for example, you may have to go under a finance inspection. What a finance inspection is going to do is they're going to look at any debt that you have accrued through the city of Chicago. It could be on parking tickets, could be on traffic violations, it could be on you have an unpaid water bill. Those will need to be reconciled before you're allowed to move forward to license issuance. And those can be worked out with the Department of Finance or the department with the Department of Finance or whoever the Department of Finance is acting on behalf of to get that resolved so you can move forward. You may need to have a health inspection. This is going to be very important for anyone who's doing anything with food. The Department of Public Health is going to have to do an inspection to make sure that if you're a location, that your location meets the standards for preparing food for the public, or if you're doing something as far as an event that's indoors, that what you're using is proper. Or even if you're looking at something like mobile food, that the vehicle and the location where you store the product that you're going to be selling meets the inspection requirements for the Department of Public Health. Some applications are going to require a fingerprint-based background inspection. So things like tobacco dealers, children's facilities, liquor license, public places of amusement, massage facilities. These are all going to require that you get a fingerprint done, and that inspection is going to have to be done before you can move forward. If you are opening up a second facility, you've had a fingerprint background check done within the last year, you will not be required to do one again. But if the last time you've been fingerprinted by the city of Chicago is over 365 days, you will need to get fingerprinted again. And then for certain licenses, children's facilities do fall into this category as listed public place of amusement. The Department of Buildings and the fire department will inspect those to make sure they meet the regulations and the codes for that specific location. After all inspections have been approved, BACP will issue the license. And as I mentioned before, we can arrange for the license to be picked up if you choose to do so, or we can have it mailed out by the city clerk. So, what to expect when you come in person? So, when you're in person, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to come to the front desk where you are going to obtain a number to be able to speak with a business consultant. The nice thing is that we have multiple ways you can obtain a number. You can speak to the person sitting at the front desk. We also have QR codes that are in the office where you can actually obtain the number right on your phone and track the number on your phone. You can also obtain a number on your phone through the website. Just a word of caution with the website. If you obtain a number and you're coming from the west side, the north side, the south side, and you have a distance to travel, there's a good chance that number is going to be called long before you get here. So don't get your number too far in advance. If it says it's a 15-minute wait and you think you're going to be 12 minutes getting here, don't get a number just yet. Wait a little longer to get it. Because if we call your number and you're not present, then we are going to move on to the next person and you're going to have to get back in line. Once you actually get here, your number is, and you come to the front desk or you take a number in advance. Even if you take a number in advance, check in with the person at front. You can let them know you already have a number. Let them know what you're trying to do, because if you're trying to get a business license, the pre-application process is most likely going to pertain. That way, while you're waiting, you can go ahead and fill out a business information sheet in advance. This is going to give you an opportunity to present information to the business consultant so they can properly go through everything and collect any additional information that they're going to need to generate an application for you to fill out. That application is what's going to show what inspections that you may have to adhere to, that you're going to possibly have to go through a zoning inspection. It's going to get the process started specifically with zoning so you can get into the zoning queue and find out if you're approved or the determination is not approved and that there's further legwork that has to be done in order to get approval. If the application is approved for payment, assuming that zoning is okay to proceed, that's when you can pay for the license. Now, as I said, if the license requires no other inspections, then once the system processes the payment, you can walk out of here 20 minutes, 30 minutes after you pay with your license that day. The license will need to be on hand at the business location. So we're not going to send licenses to a corporate headquarters. We're not going to send licenses to another destination. Because if a local inspector comes in to check to see if you are licensed properly, you need to be able to present the certificate that shows that your license is current and valid. And if additional inspections are going to be needed before that license issuance, the business consultant is going to inform each person what to expect to gain full approval. Also, the business consultant should become your point of contact as well. So if you had an inspection that wasn't approved, what do you need to do to change it from a disapproval to an approval? They can be your point of contact throughout that process all the way up through license issuance. And if needed, if you don't know who you were working with, because that happens, we lose information. Sometimes things goes longer than we expect. You can always email business licensing, all one word, at cityofchicago.org. Please note, The city of Chicago does not offer a digital version of the license for delivery via email. All licenses are printed on watermarked paper, and that is what has to be presented to an inspector. So if your corporate location requires to have a copy on file, what our recommendation is, scan the license into a PDF or to some other TIFF, JPEG, what have you, save that and email it to your corporate location. It will show the watermark behind it when you scan it, so it'll say void across it. But having done this now for as long as I have not had a corporate location that is not okay with receiving the scanned version, as long as the expiration date shows that it's valid. Now there's also the online process. So, what to expect if you're going to do your application online? Once again, you're going to go to Chicago Business Direct to apply online. And just to reiterate, that's chicago.gov/Chicago Business Direct. Before you even start working with Chicago Business Direct, you're going to need to register a user profile. One user profile is allowed per person. So we highly recommend you read the instructions carefully. There are special rules for CPAs. There are special rules for attorneys. We need everyone to follow the rules accordingly. You do not create a user profile for each business type you own. You create one user profile, and then our team here will link you to the businesses that you need to manage online. Because you can also manage your taxes directly online from Chicago Business Direct as well. So if you are a restaurant owner and you have to pay your restaurant taxes, that can be done directly through Chicago Business Direct as well as renewing your license. So we highly recommend to anyone who's getting their license, especially for the first time, go to Chicago Business Direct after you get your license if you haven't done it directly through the website, and set up an online profile and link your business account. If you use the same email address on your Chicago Business Direct profile that you used to get your license if you did it in person, the system will auto link the account you set up with your user profile. You will not have to take any extra steps to get those linked up. Once the application is approved and the license is issued, typically Chicago Business Direct can link the user profile with the business account within 24 hours. In order to work in licensing on Chicago Business Direct, you do have to go through both email and photo ID verification in order to access those services. Photo ID verification requires that you send us a government issued photo ID. That means you will need to send us a passport, driver's license, state ID, a registration card. Lawyers in the city of Chicago are allowed to use their registration card with the city of Chicago. We need to have something that was issued by the government, has your photo on it, and has some of your vital information, whether it be a birth date, an address, what have you. You can complete many types of applications online for businesses through Chicago Business Direct as well, which, as I've already mentioned, you can also manage your taxes from Chicago Business Direct. But here are just some of the examples of what you can do through Chicago Business Direct. You can set up a new business location. And that's going to be a new business without an account prior with the city of Chicago. So if you're setting up a new location, but you already have an existing account, you're not setting up a new business location, you're going to use option 2 here, which is adding a business location so that you would have multiple locations on that account. We can accommodate numerous locations for one business account. And if you're going to move your location, your license is non-transferable. So if you're picking up and going to another location, you're going to have to go through another zoning review to make sure that you meet the standards for that place you're moving to. So instead of doing a new business location again and just closing out the old location, you're going to do a move a business location application where it shows that you're moving from this location to that location and it's properly documented. Also, it's to know we're working with the same account so we can keep everything within one stop shop for you as well. So when you're managing your businesses, you can manage them all under one account if they're all housed under the same sole proprietor, LLC, corporation, etc. You can update your ownership and officers online. This is important because if you file your annual report with the state of Illinois and your LLC or your corporation has new leadership listed, such as a new managing member or a new president or secretary, those are communicated to the city of Chicago, which means we put a hold on your account, which means if you renew your license, we're not going to release your license until you submit a change of ownership and officers with the city. So therefore, once you obtain a license, if at any time the ownership or the officers of that changes, you need to communicate that within 30 days of that happening with the city and submit the proper application to make sure that your business is compliant. And as I mentioned earlier, you can also renew your license online. And if you are canceling the license, there's no need to send us an email. There's no need to send us any paperwork that shows that you've closed the location. You can simply submit a close a business location application through Chicago Business Direct. A business consultant will review it, make sure it looks good, and approve it, and then you don't have to worry about that license moving forward. We do note online applications can take much longer than an in-person process. It can take up to and beyond 30 days because we do more than 80% of the licensing we do is done online. Therefore, you may have to wait for your zoning review to take place. It can take a few weeks to get the zoning review done. Once the zoning review is done and you finish your application for the second part of the review, which is where a consultant will review it, they're going to need time to review it too while still working with the people who come into the office on a daily basis. So just give us some time to get through those. We highly recommend if you need the license sooner, don't hesitate. Come into the office at City Hall. Let us take care of you directly and let's make sure that we're moving things expedited as you need it. Just some resources in order to make sure you can get in touch with us and find out more information about licensing from the city of Chicago. As we mentioned earlier, the website is www.chicago.gov/business licensing. You are welcome to stop by the Small Business Center at City Hall. That is at 121 North LaSalle Street, room 800. As I said, we are open for walk-ins from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. We are closed on holidays, and the doors do lock at 4:30 automatically. So if you're not here by 4:30, there's no one who's going to be here from a zoning perspective to be able to look at your application to make sure it can be processed to move forward. Therefore, make sure you get in a little earlier so we can get the application process going, get a zoning determination, and then if we go past 4:30, the consultants will stay to make sure that if you can get licensed same day, we'll try and get you out of here with a license same day. If you have any questions, you can always email us in advance. If you have a general licensing question, as I mentioned earlier, business license at cityofchicago.org. You can send us an email there. That email is monitored between 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. daily. You can also email the Chicago Business Direct team directly at chicagobusinessdirect@cityofchicago.org. The Small Business Center waiting times, as I mentioned earlier, they are posted during business hours at the chicago.gov business licensing website. So if you're ever just unsure if now's a good time to come in and take care of it, you can always double check online to see what our wait times are. Those wait times do fluctuate as well. Consider it the same way you would look at an urgent care where you see wait times online. We've tried to set it up in a similar fashion so that at least you're getting a snapshot of what it looks like at that time. But in the same at the same time, if you're traveling to downtown Chicago to be at City Hall, anything could happen in that time. We could have a number of people walk in while you're en route. So understand that that time is not set in stone. It's just an estimation of the time at the time you looked at it. So that is what I have for you today on Business Licensing 101. Once again, my name is Brian Anders. I am a business consultant supervisor here with the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection with the City of Chicago. I have enjoyed presenting this to you today, and I can open up the floor for any questions that you may have.
Please put your questions in the chat box. Here's your first question. Are 501c3s required to secure a business license?
That is a very good question. A 501c3 is not required to obtain a business license unless you are doing anything as far as retail sales is concerned. So if you're doing any retail sales, wholesale sales as a part of the 501c3, you are going to need a limited business license for conducting retail sales, and we will need to have, if you're doing it, the sales are non-taxable, we will still, then you will still need to require a license, and we will need that tax ID number that makes you exempt. But what we find in most cases, the sales taxes are still going to apply, and therefore you need to obtain at least a limited business license for those. If you're a 501c3 who's opening up a children's facility, you will need to obtain a children's facility license, and you will go through the same processes that are required for anyone opening up a children's facility. My recommendation is, if you have any questions about whether or not your 501c3 needs to apply for a business license, you should send that communication directly to businesslicense@cityofchicago.org. And then that way we can take a look at what your specific business activities are and then determine whether or not you need to be licensed accordingly. And we will communicate that back to you as soon as we possibly can.
What type of license is needed for a CBD wellness store?
For a CBD wellness store, at this time, it depends on what kind of CBD you're selling. So if you are selling anything that is smokable, that may require a tobacco license. If you're talking about something that's going to deal with more like creams and oils, so forth, then in those cases, it most likely will require either a limited business license or a regulated business license. And to determine whether you're going to require which kind of license, once again, the best way to find out is to email businesslicense@cityofchicago.org. Let us take a look at what you're going to do. I understand not everybody just wants to come down to City Hall to do this. So we highly recommend asking questions in advance so you come in prepared and ready to go, because that's going to make the process smoother.
I started a business that sells candy infused with liquor, but it's not a drink. Do I need a liquor license?
Yes, you will need a liquor license. Anything that has an alcohol content to it, I believe there's a certain percentage. That is not my area of expertise. I do not work for the hospitality division who handles liquor licensing. But if you were to have any questions about that, if you email the business license email address, those questions will get directed to the proper consultants and the proper supervisors to determine what is going to be needed to move forward. And we can put you in touch with a consultant through email to answer some of those questions in advance, so that even if you wanted to do your application online, you'd have that option.
I got licensed through DCFS for a home daycare/school. Do I need an additional business license?
If you are running a daycare, yes, you will need a business license. Children's facilities are required to be licensed by the city of Chicago, and you will be required to do a full background check with the city of Chicago.
Does the website have details for an international student to get a license?
Details on an international student to get a license. What would the license be for? That's the question I have.
This presentation is being recorded and will be available at youtube.com/Chicago BACP. If you are a restaurant, do you have to complete a building inspection in order to get a business license?
That would be determined by the Department of Buildings. Whether or not you would need to have that inspection in advance. As far as the zoning requirement, if you have any construction done on the facility, or if the business activities you're going to be conducting don't meet what the previous business was at that facility, then we are going to need to see proper business permits, or zoning will need to see proper business, or I'm sorry, building permits that meet what construction had to be done on that facility. And if those building permits meet the standard, we can move forward with business licensing accordingly.
I'm starting a business that will act as an umbrella for several carrier businesses. Do each one need a business license, or can they all fall under the umbrella business?
If you have individual locations for each of those businesses, each of those individual locations need to be licensed. If you are if you're looking at something where you're not a brick and mortar location at all these locations, then it may depend on what kind of business that it's being done as. But strictly when you're talking about a carry out business in multiple locations needs to be licensed at each individual location, and each individual location will need to have the proper inspections done in order to be able to operate within the ordinance.
What if it's an Amazon online store? Do I need a license?
So if you're an Amazon online store, I would imagine you are conducting business out of your home. So that would be a home-based business license. Some of the areas that get tricky with home-based business licenses is that you're only allowed to dedicate 10% of the square footage of your home to the business. So if you're doing drop ship, that's different, where somebody else is handling the shipping, you're just doing the coordination from home, then that's pretty straightforward to get a home-based business license. But if you are storing any of the product at your home, you need to be able to store it in a very small space. Otherwise, zoning is not going to allow that to move forward. Home-based business licenses can be tricky. We actually don't even allow you to apply for a home-based business license online, because there's so much that goes into making sure that the qualifications are met to open up a business of that kind. Highly recommend that, not to email in advance, but also make an in-person visit, plan to be here for a little while, because we're going to have to look at things objectively. And sometimes it takes a little back and forth with zoning to make sure that you meet the standards that are required.
What qualifications are needed for a liquor license or a mobile bartender?
It is my understanding there's no license for a mobile bartender. I don't think the city is allowing any mobile distribution of alcohol. But as far as obtaining a liquor license, that is going to be a complicated question, because there's state considerations, there are the considerations from the city that are going to be needed. My recommendation on that is if you're specifically looking at what you're going to need to obtain a liquor license, email businesslicense@cityofchicago.org, and we can get the information out to you through a business consultant to make sure you know what you're going to need to do to get that license.
Brian, they're asking for your email address.
By all means, my email address is Brian, BRIAN, .Anders, ANDERS, @cityofchicago.org.
Do you all help obtain an LLC if I don't know how?
So if you're looking to start an LLC, there are instructions on the Illinois Secretary of State website regarding setting one up. There's numerous resources online. Um, we don't, and we don't, we our direction is going to say to go to the Secretary of State website, or you can come downtown to 69 West Washington to the state office, and you can speak with somebody there directly. It's an involved process, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the state of Illinois when that is not my jurisdiction, but I would highly recommend reaching out to them for more information.
Are landlords required to have a license if the rental properties have an LLC? And if each rental property operates as a separate LLC, will each property require a separate business license?
So a rental property, if you're talking about a vacation rental, then yes, each vacation rental property requires an individual license. If you are talking about when it's related to house share, that would be your Verbo and your Airbnb. On those questions, I would direct those to our shared housing team. And you can reach them by emailing houseshare@cityofchicago.org. And if for any reason you are having trouble reaching them, you can always email the business licensing one, and we will make sure your email gets forwarded accordingly.
What about opening a home-based business? Will someone come out to my home, and what license is required?
For a home-based business, there would be no inspection of the home itself, but a city inspector can stop by your home once you are licensed to make sure that you are compliant under the license that you've obtained. So that would be the inspection part. And can you read the other part of that question?
Will someone come out to my home, and which license is needed?
For that license, that would be a regulated business license in order to operate out of your home.
What type of license is needed for a wine and spirits outside of liquor license? I'm considering a mobile business similar to a food truck and eventually store distribution.
So as I mentioned earlier, mobile food, there is no allowance for liquor from mobile food at this time. But as it comes to every liquor question there is, like as I mentioned earlier, that is not my area of expertise. I would recommend any liquor questions, please email them to the business license at cityofchicago.org email address, and we will make sure that those emails get in the correct business consultant's hands so your questions can be answered accurately.
Is there red tape to open a cannabis consumption establishment?
What kind of consumption?
Cannabis.
So If you are opening up a dispensary, that is not regulated by the city of Chicago. That is regulated by the state of Illinois. So you will need to contact the state of Illinois for what licensing you need to have in place from the state, or what sort of certification you need from the state in order to open up a dispensary.
Can I walk into the city hall office to speak with a business consultant? Can I discuss the business plan I want to start?
If you were to come into if you were to come into our office at City Hall and you wanted to discuss the business that you are looking to operate, we would be able to inform you as to what kind of licensing you would need, what would be the um, what kind of location you would need to adhere to, if there's any permits you're going to need in advance, if it may need a special use permit. Any questions we can answer for you, we're going to try and answer you for you. But we do want to let everybody know we are not consultants like you would find at a corporation that's going to come in and do an efficiency report on the way your business is run. We are consultants that can help get you the proper licensing you need to operate your business legally within the city limits of Chicago.
Can you provide your email address again, Brian? But can you put it in the chat as well?
Hold on one second. I can put that in the chat. So you should see my email address in the chat now.
Brian, enter it again. They said it's not showing.
Sent again.
I'm starting a girls mentoring program. Do I need a license?
Yes, if you are working with children, then you are going to need to have a license. Anyone who's working with children under the age of 18 needs to get a children's facility license.
Are you saying it's illegal to start a mobile bar business in Illinois or Chicago?
I only answer questions for the city of Chicago, and as of now, it is my understanding, and once again, you can send these questions to business license, and I will make sure that the proper team gets to answer them. It is my understanding that it is currently not legal to operate any mobile bar in the city of Chicago.
And Brian, they're asking, can you put the website in the chat, please, for the small business center?
Yes. I'm also putting in the business licensing email as well, so you can just copy and paste that. And if you'd like me to share the Chicago Business Direct email, I would be happy to share that as well. I see the question, what are the hours of operation? And to speak to someone, we are open 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. You do not need an appointment. In fact, we don't make appointments. We do everything on a walk-in basis. The only time we would even consider doing an appointment is if somebody had come in the morning. We had to have them go take care of some other information we needed in order to properly license them. Then we can set up something for when they come back. We can, help get them back in front of a consultant as soon as possible. So, but no, all of the consultants are not encouraged to set up an appointment.
I'm checking the Q&A box.
Uh, actually, I actually texted the supervisor who handles liquor licensing, and he emphatically said, no, it is not legal to operate a mobile bar in the city of Chicago.
We still have a little time for more questions. So if you have more questions, please put them in the chat. How can someone go about starting a cannabis consumption space?
If you are looking to start anything that is related to cannabis, then you will need to follow up with the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois handles all activities for cannabis currently. We do not require any licensing for dispensaries. So if that changes, that will change and there will be an ordinance in place. But as of now, that is handled at the state level. I have been informed regarding the mobile bar questions. You can have what would be referred to as a mobile bartender. They cannot sell alcohol, but they are allowed to show up and pour drinks. And if you want more information on that, please send an email to either myself or the business license email address. And we will make sure that those questions can get answered accordingly.
Brian, can you talk about the dispensaries, cannabis bars one more time, please? Because we've been getting a lot of questions on this.
Right. The dispensaries and anything cannabis related you need to go to the state of Illinois to determine whether or not you qualify for that. All of that is handled at the state level. Currently, we do not handle any licensing for the sale of cannabis. We do handle licensing for CBD, but we do not handle the licensing of anything that would be something that would need to be sold at a dispensary. Meaning it is over the THC limit that is allowed for CBD products to be sold outside of a dispensary situation. Regarding questions about point of contact with the state, I do not have any specific point of contact. My best recommendation is always start with the Illinois Secretary of State website. There are many, many resources on the Illinois Secretary of State website. If you're looking for anything revenue related, the Illinois Department of Revenue website has some good resources on it. But the Illinois Secretary of State has the best resources as far as I have witnessed in looking from the state level. And they have plenty of different phone numbers that you can contact locally and downstate as well.
A 12-month traditional rental property that has an LLC needs a business license.
So if you are a traditional rental property, you do not need to be licensed in the city of Chicago. So if you're talking about residential rental property, you are not required to have a license in the city of Chicago. Now, if you manage several residential rental properties from a specific location, then we would need to license the management facility with an administrative license, and that would be a limited business license. That's a 2-year renewable license. It costs $250. It requires a zoning inspection, and it won't require any further inspections. Unless there's an activity going on there that needs further inspecting. If you have a daycare in your property management facility, well, then that would change the conversation. But if you're talking about just a straight administrative office, that's a simple limited business license, we can get you in and out same day if you have all the proper documentation, such as corporate documentation, your ID, excuse me, and it fits the zoning map.
Brian, it looks like that's it. Any last words of encouragement?
Last words of encouragement is if you're opening a business in anywhere, always start out by starting with the federal, then the state, then the county, then the city. If you have not checked each level of government, you may be missing something and you may be out of compliance. So always make sure that each level of government has been addressed and you are licensed properly to operate.
All right, thank you, Brian. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, please visit our website to receive credit at chicago.gov/BACP certificate. Again, that's chicago.gov/BACP certificate. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, everyone, for your time, and you have a good rest of your day.